Do you have an all-in, all-the-time attitude? Do you believe second place is first place for losers? One thing is for certain. The only easy day was yesterday. Welcome to Dare to Live Greatly. Sponsored by USMilitary.com. Your podcast for fearless warriors. Now, let's dive in and go one-on-one with today's fearless warrior. Direct from the USMilitary.com network. Starting in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, my name is Larry Fowler with USMilitary.com podcast, where we ask tough questions for tough people. Today, we're honored to have Guy Cortese as our guest host. And in the hot seat, we have Gary Ryals-Sammons.
Yeah.
Gary, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, it's great to have you today.
Thank
So
you.
tell me, is it Gary Ryals or Gary Sammons?
To y'all, it will be Gary Ryals, because I was born with Gary Sammons. Father was killed when I was 3 in a car accident. My mother won a lawsuit. She remarried, and his name was Ryals. And the deal was that he would adopt us. That way, if they ever got divorced, he'd have to pay child support. Well, sure enough, because she had all the money. Sure enough, about 4 or 5 years later, they divorced. He paid child support all that time.
Right.
So I went to the military, all through high school of Ryals, the military of Ryals.
Right.
And then right before my first child was born in '86, I had never seen my stepfather Ryals since, which I learned later was my mom's doing. And we have got back together. But anyway, so I thought I'm going to name my children the name that I was given by birth, which was Sammons. So I went to Ryals-Sammons.
Right.
Their last name was just Sammons. So Ryals has been silent all these years on every legal document I have.
Right.
When I come back here, it's Ryals.
Well, we're going to keep it brain dead simple, what I call Larry proof today. And
no
I'm
problem.
going to call you, we're going to call you Gary. How does that work?
That sounds good.
Well, tell me, Navy SEAL. So what was it about Navy SEALs? Why did you want to become a Navy SEAL?
Because my mother was married 5 different times and lost my original father, I looked to my uncles for being like fathers to me. My mother was the 13th child. She was the first of the second dozen, they called it.
Wow.
So my uncles were my father figures, and all of my uncles were in the Navy. 3 were in Pearl Harbor when it was bombed. 1 was killed on the USS Shaw, which was the biggest explosion of the Pearl Harbor attack.
Right.
I had another cousin who was a captain in the Navy, another cousin. So a bunch of the first cousins were also in the Navy. So I went through high school, barely squeaked through. Had to go to summer school. I was a jock. I didn't want to learn. And so I went to college, Miami South Dade, for a total of 2 weeks. Not 2. Everybody, 2 years? Oh, no. 2 weeks. I just said, this is not for me. I need some adventure in my life.
Wow.
Hey, let me do what my uncles did. So I joined the Navy.
Right. So it's in your DNA.
It is. And unfortunately, because I wasn't very good in high school, I didn't score really that high on my test. I mean, they told me, okay, you go to quartermaster school, signalman, or radio school, but we're not going to guarantee you any school. You're going to have to do strike once you get to your duty station for a position.
Right.
I didn't care. I just wanted some adventure in my life.
Right.
So I went to boot camp in Orlando.
Right.
And they just showed a film on SEALs, black and white, by Master Chief Barrett, I think was his name, was there.
Yes, in Orlando.
In Orlando.
Right.
And I looked at it and I said, hey, this is right up my alley. Because in high school, my junior year, that's when I really just came alive. I was junior class president. And then my senior year, I was senior class president.
Right. Cool.
I was captain of the football team.
Wow.
I mean, I played baseball. I was a jock.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that, it was like, this would be my opportunity to do something different. Because I was always looking at doing something different, strive. So I took the test. I failed the swimming because it was all breaststroke and side stroke. And it was like I was a kid growing up in Florida. We'd swim, but we didn't do breaststroke or side stroke. So I failed. So he saw, I guess, potential in me. So during the work week of boot camp, you work the galley, you work this, you work that, and he made sure that I got the gym for that week. So he taught me how to swim. Took the test again, and I passed it by 3 seconds. I still have that sheet of paper.
Good for you.
And since I didn't have any guaranteed schools, I went straight to Buds.
Right. So was Buds a piece of cake for you?
Oh man, it was the easiest thing. No, it was extremely hard. I mean, it was very challenging. I mean,
Yeah, but you were a jock.
cold. Yeah, but you found out really quick there. It wasn't all the physical. I mean, you can do the physical part until you just dropped. Right. Your body's only going to take. You'll go over the limit, but sooner or later you're going to drop. But it was the mental, and it was the coldness.
The cold water.
The cold water. I mean, that was the part that really got to you.
Yeah, cold water can make cowards out of most of us,
Oh
but
yeah.
not
So it
all
was
of
tough.
us.
I mean, it was no doubt. It was tough training.
So, did you ever think about quitting?
No.
No, never.
There's different ways to look at quitting something.
Right.
Some people, I mean, if I knew that this was not what I thought it was going to be, you know, this is not my cup of tea. The problem was, it was my cup of tea. This was what I was meant to do. So me quitting because of that, because of the hardships, knowing in my head this is what I was meant to do, I would have had a very hard time living with myself if I quit. I would have came back for a second time.
Right.
So quitting just wasn't an option. I mean, I just was not going to quit. I mean, if they can kick me out, I'd have to leave. But I was gonna stick it out.
Right.
So I didn't think about quitting.
So, how did you learn to handle the hardships?
Well, I was a believer, and I know a guy knew that.
I did.
So we share back in training back in those days, and basically that got me through it. I remember going to San Clemente Island for class 87. They asked for volunteers, and of course I was volunteered, and to watch the Explosive magazine. So I just did watch. So, but I also participated in their PT, even though I wasn't held to their standards. I'd go on their runs, and so the instructors saw that. I got to learn the instructors; they got to learn me.
Right.
But I spent my 19th birthday out there in San Clemente, and I was in the middle of the night. The waves are crashing against the rocks. It was raining off and on, which little rain we had. And I remember just being cold and just looking out there and just seeing the power of God. And to me, it was like opening of the Red Sea. Like, you're going to make this. You're going to make it. So to me, that was my faith is what really got me through. I really do think so.
Do you think after being in the teams, is faith well known, or is it prominent in the teams?
I think it's gotten more, but I think it's almost to the point where you think like, you know, I can't admit to that. You know, I'm a SEAL team. You know, SEALs. I shouldn't admit to that. So I think it's one of these things maybe people might have.
Right.
They might not really be showing it, but they still have the faith. Right. I know that during Buds, there was probably that I was aware of at least 3 people that had some had faith.
Okay.
I really didn't. I mean, I was a quiet. You know, it was an inner faith that I had with my relationship to say I need help getting through this training.
Right.
You know, I need help. I can't do it alone.
Yeah.
So.
Is your faith still strong today?
It is. It could always be stronger, but I think I definitely have that presence. You know, like Mark was saying. You know, you feel that need. You know, you're there. He's like tapping on your shoulder all the time. You know, you need to get right. You need to stay right.
Right.
And that because you do. You know, accept him. You get that point where there's no backing out. He's not going to let go of you.
Right.
So you're going to have to wake up to his calling and what he wants you to do. You know, so I knew that I was going to get through training because of him. So
who is your swim buddy?
My swim buddy was Benny Kalua. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He was from Hawaii. And I think on the time things, they actually took a swimmer that was a little bit better than you to make you better. You know, are close to the same times, no doubt. And we were always probably, I think, the 4th or 5th group that came in. I think in pairs. Everything we did, everything I did was always the 4th or 5th. I wasn't the greatest on the O course, but I was up there high enough. I wasn't the fastest runner, but I was high enough. And Benny and I were good. We were good partners.
Got it.
Good swim buddies.
You know, I think through Bud's training, the one thing that the instructor certainly preached, and I think we adapted, was teamwork.
Oh, absolutely. Teamwork. I used teamwork for my entire life after that because I knew for a team work, you gotta work together. You gotta think of each other. You gotta cover each other. And that's very important in teams. They know that. They press it. And
in fact, that's why why they call it.
Yeah.
In fact, SEAL teams are called The teams.
Yeah.
That's right.
The teams. Yes.
And I remember you talking about swim buddies not being 6 feet apart. I mean, I remember one group got 6 feet apart, and they had to wear that Hauser rope around them. You guys remember that?
6 feet apart while we're swimming.
Yes.
Right.
And they
Okay.
got caught because they drifted away, and they had to
Right.
wear that Hauser rope, which is really thick. I don't know how thick it is, but it's a thick
Right.
rope, and they had a loop on each end. They put it on, and it was 6 feet long.
Right.
To remind them they can't be more than 6 feet.
That
they
was-
had to wear that for I don't know how many days, but on the runs, everything they had to wear that rope.
That was me.
It was Jimmy King and somebody else.
No,
thought.
I ended up, I know one time
oh,
that
that was
I was
tough.
stuck with that because one day Larry, for some reason, wasn't my swim buddy, and I got stuck with a guy named Davis that the instructors hated, and they stuck him with me as a swim buddy, and he refused to stay within 6 feet of me.
So that was
It was tough.
that was
Right.
branding you to
Right.
to remind you that hey, you have to be within 6 feet of your swim buddy.
So during Buds, was there any moment of time that you were afraid? Fear, had a fear.
Oh yeah, I would say coming from Florida, I thought the water part was going to be a breeze. You know, I mean, I remember going in my pool. I had a pool when I was little. We'd take them empty milk gallon jugs of
Right.
water or milk, and we'd take them. We'd get air in them and go down 10 feet. We'd suck air out of them. You know, I mean, I thought I
Right.
was like a frogman, even though I didn't know what a frogman was at the time. But so I thought the swimming was going to be easy, and I found out being a rock in the water. I mean, I sunk. So
Right.
doing drown proofing. That was a little scary, knowing that I'd have to go all the way to the bottom, bounce up, and because of being that fear of doing it, I passed.
Right.
But that fear continued on with anything to do with water. Guy Cortez brought up a point of when they filled your mask full of water, and you had to breathe through your mouth. I had a hard time, not breathing through my nose, so it just created more fear.
Yeah.
So luckily, I had a good. So during the drown proofing, I made it, but during the dive phase, luckily I had Steve Westling, who was a really good
Right.
dive partner,
Right.
and he helped me. He saw that, and so he really did help me.
Wow,
Because I remember
good.
we were diving the mixed rigs, the mixed gas,
Right.
and I had they were old equipment, and I had a problem. I started going up, and Steve Westling grabbed my leg, and he pulled me back down.
Wow.
Says, "No, focus
Yeah.
on me."
So the rule of the thumb is not to outrun your bubbles.
That's
right.
right.
Is that right? Okay.
So anyway,
So he
because
grabbed
of that, Steve helped me a lot. So that was my fear. I think of anything else was the water evolutions, and then because of that, when the SDV program came up, going to that was the best thing.
SDV means
Because, swim delivery vehicle. Now it's
Right.
SEAL delivery vehicle.
it's a mini sub for
Right.
two people. Right.
But you're underwater a lot, and you're cooped
Right.
up in a closed container underwater. You can't see out of it, and you're breathing, and you're under ships and the noise and everything else. So that kind of really taught me to be a much better diver, which
Right.
came over the fear. So I conquered the fear by hitting the fear dead on. So that was the
Right.
thing to do.
We're here for a SEAL reunion.
Right.
And one of the beautiful things about being out here is we're getting together after 45 years.
Yeah, incredible.
And this was an incident that I believe you had forgotten about the face clearing, but Guy here remembers that like it was
Yeah.
yesterday as you were describing it to us, right?
yeah, I do because I was really afraid that we were going to lose Gary.
And you're
Yeah.
a good guy. We didn't want to
yeah.
lose you,
Well,
right?
I think during the dive thing with the pool harassment with the tanks, I failed the first day. And, you have a second chance to go back. And I remember
Right.
being on that bus going across the street to the pool, knowing
Right.
that if I did not do this, that if I did not pass this,
Right.
I was going to be gone. And that was fear. That was like, oh my gosh, I gotta do this. I gotta do this. I gotta do this. Like, you better help me here because this is the point I'm going to be
Right.
out. And I think that evolution
Right.
was probably the worst for me.
Right.
But getting over that evolution, then the rest of the evolutions became, a lot easier.
Right.
'Cause-
So refresh my memory. I believe pool harassment is when you go sit on the bottom of the pool, maybe 10 feet, and the instructor, there'll be an instructor assigned to you.
Yes.
You go sit, and they will come behind you and harass you. Take your tanks off, tie your tubes off, take your regulator off.
Yeah.
Basically, their goal is to see if they can strike the fear or you will panic,
right.
and then, of course, you'd have to redo. Is that how you remember it, Guy?
Yeah. So and you're when they take stuff off of you, you're supposed to sit there and put it all back on untangle it, put it back on, and everything.
But I remember them tying the tubes in knots.
Well, that's why they
Right.
used the cold weather gear. It was the cold weather dual hose versus the single hose that we would normally be using. But they use that so they can pull it behind your back because it stretches,
Right.
and they can tie it in knots. So that's why
Right.
we use that particular rig for pool harassment.
Right.
And so they got to the point where you couldn't fix it, so you had to ditch it, and you had to try to fix it, breathe off the air of the
Right.
tank with bubbles, whatever it takes to come up. And I remember Officer Ford, he actually had to be breathing off his tank. He took his regulator off of his tank, and he was actually opening the valve and sucking air out because I think they're harder, on the officers because they're
remember
supposed to be
doing that.
leaders.
Right.
But I remember him coming up going, I didn't have to do that. Thank goodness.
Right.
But I passed it, and that was probably the happiest day of my buds training was that day
Absolutely.
when I passed that. 'Cause that
Isn't it funny though that the thing that you anticipated would be the easiest part of
was
buds
the hardest.
Yes.
was the hardest, and probably some of the things that you would have thought were going to be harder
Yeah.
were actually easier.
It was a mind trick.
It is mine.
Physical
right?
PT. I mean, how hard can physical PT? I worked out. Well, how hard can physical PT be? Well, we found out really quick
Well, and,
how
and one
hard
of
it
the,
could be.
and one of the characteristics of that you thought would benefit you actually
Yeah.
worked against you. Like you were really lean and muscular, but that's what made you a rock in the water.
It was.
And it also made you more susceptible to the cold.
And
I didn't
was-
have a problem with the cold because I'm fat.
And I had long legs and short torso, so I learned really quickly that leverage.
Right.
It's like we were talking about that earlier. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Franco Columbu. I don't know if you guys remember them. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a big guy. Franco Columbu was 5'7" or 8" compared to 6'2" Arnold. He
Right.
lifted more weight than Arnold Schwarzenegger because he had the leverage of the short legs, short torso for squats and benches, shorter distance to go, so shorter arms. So you got to look at the leverage. And doing flutter kicks or anything where we lift our legs up was hard for me to do.
Right.
And,
Well,
but
you
we
had to
did
do
it.
500 of them, so that
Yeah,
makes a
that doesn't
difference.
help.
You mentioned that it was a mind game, and
It was.
Guy, if you could just share that, because I think what you remembered is him putting the mask on, and the only thing he needed to do was fill his mask with water and breathe out of his mouth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, we all did. But it was after 2 or 3 days of no sleep. We hadn't slept, and all we had to do, in fact, you do it all the time when you're wearing scuba gear. You have your mask on. It's full of air usually, but and then you have a regulator in your mouth,
Right.
and you're breathing air through your mouth. Well, the instructors wanted us to go down in the water, fill our mask with water.
Right.
You stand up, you've got a mask full of water, and then you had to stand there and breathe.
Right.
Well, all you had to do was open your mouth. But Gary, and for some reason, everybody had done it, and the instructors were picking on Gary for some reason. But he'd stand up there, and he'd stand there like this,
And not breathing
and,
out of his mouth.
and then he'd finally rip his mask off, and he'd go, and it'd be like, and I kept yelling, Gary, breathe through your mouth, breathe through your mouth,
Right.
and it was like, it was just, but it's one of those things where you just haven't slept. Your mind's not
Right.
working right,
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, Hell Week, 5.5 days, no sleep except for 3.5 hours, and that's broken up in 2 or 3 different segments, just enough time for your body to collapse where the instructors can come in and harass and wake you up.
And it was
Yeah.
the worst
Sounded-
because your body was so stiff when you got back up.
Well, the
Wow.
only 3 hours I remember is 1 hour on Tuesday morning when they said go get a shower and change clothes, and some guys went straight to sleep and they didn't get a chance to shower.
Yeah.
Some of us went and took a shower, put in clean clothes, and then took our hour. And then the other 2 hours that I remember was when we were playing Steal the Paddles, and we all collapsed on top of each other, and the next thing we knew, the instructor, I think it was planned sleep. The instructors
Oh,
knew
yeah.
we were going to do it, but the
Right.
next thing we knew, the instructors were throwing us in the water, and they
Yeah.
didn't let us out until somebody quit.
Wow, wow.
That's the only 3 hours I remember during Hell Week.
Hell Week was definitely tough. I remember just the cold. The only injury I got through all the training was the swollen knees during Hell Week.
Right.
And then your hands swell so much that matter of fact, I still have marks on my hand today where
Right.
your hand split, skin splits.
Right.
And
I still have something.
but but my knees healed up, and I was able to go. So.
Right. So Gary, so here we are 45 years later,
Mm-hmm.
and apparently you could not get enough of bombs. So tell us about your adult life.
Yeah. Well, I got the teams.
Mm-hmm.
To me, cause of maybe repetition of training and not using it, and so forth. So I just got a little homesick. So I left, went home, tried different types of work, businesses, and nothing was working for me. So I almost came back in, but then they told me I had to go through phase 2 and phase 3 again.
Phase 2 and phase 3.
Yes.
Okay.
And I said, nah, that's not an option. So I saw a demonstration of a bomb squad at our local sheriff's office. And
Right.
so I thought that's interesting. So I went to a law enforcement academy using the GI Bill. And luckily, everything in my law enforcement career worked exactly how I wanted it to be. Very, very little time in uniform, in marked cars. I got on the bomb squad. I loved it. I got hungry for the knowledge. I got on the SWAT team because of being
Right.
being the SEAL team. So SWAT team. I became a sniper. Went to different
Wow.
schools. Got on the dive team. So I was in all 3 of those at one time.
Wow.
On our special forces, our special teams, and then I became the commander of the bomb squad. Traveled all over the U.S. Got into explosive breaching. Got
Right.
into how to make IEDs. So I went to a lot of electronic schools.
Right.
And just sucked in the knowledge, and that kind of like replaced what I was doing, in the teams.
Right. Sure.
And so I still do it today. I still teach for a contractor, basically explosive breaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I teach firearms training and concealed carry, just as a part-time gig.
Right.
And so when I left the teams, I was able to go into another career where I put on our Facebook page. We had to do some underwater shots on found explosives. The Navy EOD team was contracted to come in and clean it up, but they didn't want to worry about getting the explosives, so they contacted me because explosives in the civilian law enforcement is so much easier to store than it is military. And so they had us come in and actually place the charges on it and blow it up and stuff. So it's just been a really incredible career. I just retired after almost 33 years.
Wow. But you haven't actually retired. You're still training.
Still
correct?
training, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. People were coming to me for concealed carry, and I'd ask them questions. They didn't have a clue on how to handle their guns. And so my wife and I started a company called Trident, of course, Firearms Training Solutions.
Of
So
course.
we teach an 8-hour class. And the concealed carry part is just like an add-on. You get the certificate to turn in to get your
Right.
concealed carry. But we teach people how to shoot. And we enjoy doing it. It's
Right.
fun to do. So
But not shoot each other.
that's it.
So before we end, let me ask you this. What advice would you have to any future SEAL wannabe?
I would say you definitely need to take a close look at yourself to make sure that that's what you want to do. Is that the career path you want to take? And once you make that decision to do it, you need to just put your head down and just suck it up. My wife has a saying, "Suck it up, Buttercup." You just got to. There's so many sayings the SEALs have had. If it don't suck, we don't do it. Or whatever the
Right.
case may be. Just to do it, just for your own personal pride and to get the job done. And just take one day at a time,
Right.
like what we learned how to do.
Right.
And like Mike Crook said, I'm always going to quit after the next evolution.
Right.
Which means you'll never quit.
Right.
So that's what I think to do. Just respect, look at teamwork.
Yes.
Teamwork is everything. I'm getting to the BUDS training.
Yeah.
So that's what I would recommend.
How about you, Guy? When you meet someone, they say they want to be a Navy SEAL, what advice do you offer them?
I usually tell them not to set their heart on that, because no matter how qualified you are to become a Navy SEAL, even if you're physically and mentally capable of it,
Right.
I think your chances are still around 30%,
Right.
because there's still the possibility of injury
Yeah, sure.
Right.
that you don't even know about. And so I say, look, it's not a guarantee. It's not like you can it's not like you can get a degree and and get into it. And yes, grit and determination are a big part of it, but there's a certain aspect of it where you have to be lucky not to get hurt.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
and there's no guarantee that no matter how determined you are, that you're not going to quit. I stayed in the reserves a long time, and I've known guys that were triathletes, world-class triathletes,
Right.
that thought their dad was a Navy SEAL, and all their life they grew up wanting to become a Navy SEAL. They went to Buds, 2 weeks later they quit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Gary, wow, I'm thrilled. We are thrilled and honored to sit here with you today. So
Nice
thank
to
you
be
for your
here.
service with the
Yeah.
police, as a sheriff, bomb squad, all the above. You're an amazing person. So, again, I am honored to have served and went through Buds with you. It's
It was
just
an
a
honor.
highlight
Honor
for
to be
me.
with you guys.
Well,
So.
all right, guys, that's it. Thank you for joining USMilitary.com podcast.
You just listened to the USMilitary.com network podcast, Dare to Live Greatly, where we go one-on-one with proven, documented, fearless warriors. Thank you for being a team member today. Remember, live a life bigger than self, always. See you next week.